Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind, Season 4. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. If you are a cast member of this show or any show that I watch, keep in mind that I'm just speculating based on the edit, and also don't use what I'm saying as a replacement for therapy. Obviously, you'd want to be assessed and treated by someone in person. You deserve that. Let's watch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because I'm the mom, helicopter mom, I don't even know how to start this. I'm a paralegal, and I have a big tribe at home, and he's like the baby Jesus of the family. He's the firstborn. And so as soon as Paul said, yes, I met somebody and her name is Micah.
Okay, so nothing unusual here, but some notable things. It's always interesting to meet the family, right? So they commented how they had the same hair. It's not unusual to marry our parents, so to speak. Freud talked about that a lot, of course. It's not that we want to marry our parents, but it is that we feel comfortable. We associate certain qualities. Maybe look, but I think more importantly, vibe, right? And values. There's a way that our parents, if we went through good experiences, positive experiences, that are really deep in our personality, and it would be natural to seek that out when we're older. She called him baby Jesus, so I don't know what that means. He also said earlier that he's quiet and that he's not forthcoming or something. So when he was talking with Zach, I just thought I'd point that out, but let's watch this.
We went to town, and I was telling them, I'm like, I think we found Micah online, but we're not sure. And he's like, oh, really? Well, what do you think? And I'm like,
okay, it's natural to do this in the absence of information. And she's saying, look, he's a very special kid in our family. And so when we found, and I guess first grandchild, right, there tends to be more attention given to that. Not always, but so they internet stalked her. I think that's natural.
We immediately were talking about like travel and just like our outlook on life, and like I think that was like probably the first thing that was like, oh, Paul's so exciting. But like that like showed me kind of like what he wanted in life and what he saw as a future, and I was like, that's the exact same mindset I have. We are very different. Like I'm like very.
People can have their own criteria for when they meet someone, but I would say that travel dreams would not be something that I would hang my hat on.
I was like, oh, Paul's so exciting. But like that like showed me kind of like what he wanted in life and what he saw as a future, and I was like, that's the exact same mindset I have. We are very different. Like I'm like very like hair, makeup, like yeah, like that. But he also like he has the ability to like ground me a bit, and I feel like it just like balanced.
Yeah, he said something similar away from her talking to Zach, that she is, I don't know what adjective they put to it, but the way she described it is, she said, I'm hair and makeup and all that, and he's more grounded, so we balance each other out. That can work. People will claim this is evidence that opposites attract, but when we actually look at couples that work out, there's a lot more overlap than there are differences. The differences are more notable, particularly if you're in the relationship. One person's extroverted, one person's introverted, one person likes to travel, the other person doesn't. One person likes to work a lot, one person doesn't. One person's good with money, the other person's bad with money. One person likes to be clean. These things are noticeable in a relationship, but people are a lot more similar in values, in life experiences, in background, in religion, in politics, in parenting style, in even class, right? Like your socioeconomic status level in a society, typically people will feel more comfortable or be attracted to. They're not usually things that you register consciously. Sometimes you do, but it is something that will make things feel similar accents. There's a lot of science in this, actually. They've tried to look at this from a variety of different ways, and there's some minor caveats or some major caveats to what I'm saying right now, but it's hard to pin down. Anyway, so she is saying that he grounds her and she pulls him, I think, out of his shell that he's normally in. And yeah, that can be a configuration that can work for sure. It can also be a major thorn in the side of a relationship, right? She might want someone that will meet her with her energy, and he might want someone similarly. So it depends, but we're hearing similar reasons as to why they like each other, which is a good sign.
Happy and in love, and because he hasn't really had like a even potential fiance, or
not really.
Yeah.
So this is huge.
I know, I'm excited. I feel like just like seeing you like somehow makes me like love Paul more. I don't know how like what it is, but I think I just like see such a like fun.
It's a good sign as well. And it's nice that she is feeling that, and a stronger sign that she's actually in this legitimately. Doesn't mean that per se, but to be able to say that, and that is something that I think most people around the world acknowledge what Micah is saying without even having to say it. But for us mainstream Americans, it can sometimes be like, I actually feel even stronger towards this individual because I met their family and I like their family and bonding. It's like, perk. But in other parts of the world, and there's no right way to do this, but in other parts of the world, this is the norm, that you wouldn't even think about marrying someone without bonding with their family. Sometimes it's the opposite direction, where you bond with the family and then you become engaged to the person that you're getting engaged with. And it is something to think about when you are dating. Mainstream Americans tend to, and as evidence on this show sometimes, and 90 Day Fiancé as well, that it's like, okay, I love you, I want to be with you, and I don't really care about your family. I don't care if I bond with them, I don't care what they're like, I don't care if they like me, it doesn't really matter. And if that works out, it works out, but it can sometimes be short-sighted, it can sometimes deny your partner's connection with their family, and it's a missed opportunity. People will email me and say, I have massive conflict with my mother-in-law. And sometimes there was nothing you can do, but sometimes I will ask, well, when you first met your partner and it started to get serious, did you put effort into bonding with your mother-in-law? Now, sometimes mother or extended family won't reciprocate and there's nothing you can do, but if you can, and you can lay the groundwork for a stronger relationship, then when a conflict comes up, you can talk about it, right? The reason why you can talk about conflict, hopefully in a healthy way, with your partner is because you've spent a lot of time developing and building goodwill and trust between the two of you, so that when you do hit a rough patch, you have that foundation to stand on and that trust between each other. Whereas if you avoid your extended family, then at the first sign of conflict, all you have is conflict, you have no trust, and you don't even have any reason mutually to try to salvage and repair the situation because you never had anything to begin with. Now, again, case-by-case basis, it depends. Again, some extended family are very unreasonable and there's nothing you can do about it.
Like mother-in-law, like daughter-in-law relationship. I'm just so happy you made it down here to see us. It's so funny because like there's so many times where Paul and I have been like, you know, we're so different. Like, I wonder why we're so attracted to each other. And it's like, well, here we go. You're marrying your mom.
You guys are so similar.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. By the way, I believe they're at Rheinhaus, which is a German-themed bar restaurant on Capitol Hill. They have, is it shuffleboard or like indoor small bowling? What's it called? Anyway, it's famous for that.
Says that. Oh my God.
If you support us, then I'm happy.
Total support. Gosh, I've just been beside myself waiting for this day.
Oh my
You're
God.
even more adorable in person.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I'm happy I passed the background check. That would have put a big halt in things.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever seen an introduction between the fiancé and the parents better than this. They smile similarly, they laugh similarly, they seem to be on exactly the same page. So, you know, it's nice to see. Now, of course, if I zoom out a little bit and look at the potential problems here, is Micah right now is being very kind and nice and pleasant and open, but we know that there's another side to Micah, another presentation to her behavior anyway on the show. And maybe the mom does too. And Paul senses that or something. I don't know, but there's no evidence of that. I don't want to think that, but I don't know. I just have to consider that possibility, I guess. I don't know.
We have your place here, I have my place here, and then the place in Arizona.
Yeah.
Then we would just like get rid of this.
So she is from Arizona, maybe.
I haven't really introduced him to.
Side note, I think that coffee place is in Columbia City. If you listen to the audio podcast, Rebecca, her office is actually just a couple blocks from that place. They also showed the geese that were eating the grass. It seems kind of pleasant, but they poop everywhere, and it is disgusting.
I think my dad has an understanding of like what's going on, but my mom literally has zero idea.
Oh man, so we're gonna have to explain the whole thing to her, huh?
I have not even told her that I'm engaged.
I keep looking for signs as to, I guess I want to know if they're in it to win it and they're dedicated and they're wanting, at least at this point, to legitimately try to get married. Then as I'm watching this, it orients my mind in a way that is taking it as real. If one person has 9 toes out of the door, then I actually see it differently, and I'll react to it differently, and I'll feel like there's less at stake, right? Like if she has 9 toes out of the door, or he does, and they have a fight, I'll be like, well, I don't know how invested they are in the situation. Whereas if they have 11 toes in the door, then they have a fight and it could really be jeopardizing and threatening to their relationship. So it's hard for me to know how to react. I guess it's emulative, or maybe even a factor because of my history as a couple therapist, that when I meet with a couple, one of the first things that I will try to assess if I don't get a clear, indirect idea is how invested each person is. It's common for couples to come into couple therapy too late, or at least late in the game, when their conflict has taken has taken a toll on their relationship over time. They might have had 20 years of difficulty, and they finally go to couple therapy. So it's not always the case that people come into therapy with the opportunity to actually fix things. Sometimes literally by the end of the first session or halfway through the first session, after they talk openly and I might ask some questions, one or both of them say, yeah, I think we want a divorce. We've talked about it before, but really when I think about it, I don't think there's any point in trying to salvage this. I've been done for years, that kind of thing. So it will happen like that sometimes. And I don't always know the answer to that question. So if a couple comes in and sits down and I don't know how invested, and one of the questions I ask, I don't know if you hear my dog, is that I will ask on a scale from 1 to 100, 100%, 0%, how much of a percent are you in this relationship? What percentage of you is thinking that this is going to work and is dedicated to actually seeing this through for the rest of your life? And you'll hear some interesting numbers there. Someone might seem like they're 100, but they'll say they're 40. Or someone will seem like they're 30, but they're actually 95%. Someone can complain a lot. They could be really upset. They could be very concerned about the relationship, but divorce is far from their mind. That is not where they're headed. That may be one day, but that's not really where they're at right now. So it's important to know that, because as a couple therapist, if one or both people, because this will happen sometimes, one person will be like, well, I'm like at a 1%. I've been done for years, because sometimes people come to couple therapy because they feel like they have to. They're like, well, if we don't go to couple therapy, then we didn't at least give that a try. And what I would suggest to people is that you should be preventative, or at the very least, when it starts to head down a certain road, you should seek couple therapy. Now, I know a lot of you will say, I can't convince my spouse to go to couple therapy. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I think part of it is going on a campaign and also alleviating any kind of fears. One of the ways that you can alleviate fear is to say, look, well, let's just go to one session, and look, I'm actually going to have you go first so that you can bond with the person and get things off your chest, so that there's no worry that somehow the therapist is going to side with me against you, that kind of thing. Sometimes men will feel this way. Men have a harder time asking for help. They have a harder time admitting that they have problems on average. So there's that. They also have a harder time emoting, that kind of thing. Also, you might ask your partner, what sort of therapist would you like? Maybe gender will play a role. I don't know. Age sometimes. So you can do things maybe. A mistake that people will make is that the person who really wants to go to therapy will call around because they have the most energy around it and the most initiative, and they get a hold of a therapist and maybe have a couple conversations. And then the person who already doesn't want to go to couple therapy is at a disadvantage. And then that person, you've bonded with this person and you chose this therapist because the therapist fits sort of the profile, the sort of therapist you're looking for. And now the person who didn't want to go to therapy also has the additional problem of feeling like an outsider, that kind of thing. Now, I will say that as a couple therapist myself, I can detect that sort of thing, and I actually prioritize that at the beginning. If one person either explicitly tells me or I get the vibe that they might not come back to the second session, I will be very careful in how I talk with that person. Not because I'm trying to lie or manipulate, but because I'm not doing any good if I alienate the person. And sometimes people can be very easily alienated in therapy, right? If they're reluctant. So I will perhaps even sacrifice my relationship a little bit with the main person who wants to come to therapy because I know that they're going to come to a second session. Because what I'm trying to get to is a place where both people trust me and believe that I'm not going to take one side against the other, that I'm going to listen to both people and try to see both sides. That's usually my tact. I mean, sometimes I'll side with one person in a sense, but only after I know that the other person who's being outed or being left out is strong of a relationship with me such that they don't feel like I'm biased or that I'm against them or something like that. It's a false notion, a myth that somehow couple therapists are never supposed to take sides. I mean, if they come into session and one person says, yeah, I pushed my wife down the stairs because she bothered me, she didn't cook dinner that night. As a couple therapist, I'm not supposed to take sides. That's an extreme example. But, there's a lot of things along those lines. Some people are more prone to distortion in a particular moment. Some people have a harder time admitting that they have triggers or remembering even what they did in a fight, that kind of thing. Not in a physical fight, well, sometimes, but more commonly in a verbal back and forth conflict with someone. People will not remember what they did. And so sometimes I have to say, well, I think your partner said you said that and I wasn't there, but is it possible? So it's kind of siding. Anyway, point is as a therapist, I'm trying to help. And if I just follow these rigid dogmatic rules of never take sides, that could actually limit me in terms of my ability to help. And sometimes I'll literally even tell the individual, I'll just be like, so I know I'm coming across like I'm siding with your partner here, but it's not that I'm siding with them. It's just that when I hear both of your stories, it kind of sounds like this. Of course, I wasn't there, but is it possible that maybe their story is more in line with what happened, or is it possible that you did that and you just don't remember? It's delicate, but if I'm going to help people, I have to step out on that limb sometimes. And if there's a rupture, I have to repair the relationship, which of course happens. Anyway, point is that some couples will come into therapy having no conflict at all because they just want to set up a relationship with a couple therapist in case conflict does happen. So anyway, this brings me all back to the original thing, which is that sometimes I need to know where a couple is in terms of how dedicated they are to each other, because if they're not dedicated to each other, then the primary question is, do you want to work on becoming more dedicated? The person who's 10% in the relationship, so you have a 90% and a 10%. There's no use in talking about conflict management or increasing intimacy if one person is basically done with the relationship, right? Because they're not invested. You could talk about those things and assign homework and stuff, but the 10% person either won't do it because they don't want to, or their heart won't be in it. So the next question, we have to go more fundamental to the 10% person. I will ask them, and we can maybe talk about this for 10 sessions. Maybe it's just 10 seconds, but I would say, do you want to work on raising that 10%? Do you want to try to raise that 10%? And if they say no, then we're looking at another conversation about, well, maybe couple therapy isn't really indicated. Do you want to talk about how to break up well? Do you want to take some time to think about it? What do you want to do given the fact that you're 10% and you actually aren't interested in trying to raise that dedication and hope in this relationship? Now, usually people will say, yeah, I would like to raise that 10%. Well, then we have to talk about what is going to raise that 10%. Because if we talk about high-minded things like lowering conflict and increasing intimacy, which can be higher level, then just fundamentally, what do you need this week to get you from a 10% to a 15%? And those fundamental, very short-term conversations is what we have. But anyway, so maybe that's why when I watch this show, I'm always speculating and talking. But one of the things we see from Micah right now is that she hasn't told her parents. And might that be an indication that she's not as dedicated? Or is it an indication of something else? Or is she just kind of shy around that? I don't know. I guess we'll maybe find out.
Because I know, going into this experience, I conveyed to you guys, there's no way that I'm going to be able to, actually, meet someone that I want to be, engaged to.
I don't know. Sounds like another indication that she wasn't actually going into the pods in good faith. her and Irina, who knows, there's behaviors that indicate they weren't there in good faith. They weren't actually there to meet someone. Or maybe they were like, well, maybe there's a 3% chance I'll meet someone, but probably not. And their behavior exhibited that. And maybe they assumed everyone else was the same, and thus when people started actually crying, they were surprised and then also laid into them in some very pathological ways. Made fun of them, laughed at them, eavesdropped on them, trying to humiliate them, I don't know. So I wonder, again, if she's actually dedicated to this relationship with Paul, given what she said. Now, maybe he completely wowed her in the pods and completely changed her mind as to whether or not she could meet someone on the show. We saw her behavior towards Kwame, which probably 10 ticks in the column of that she's actually not wanting to marry Paul. But I don't know. I remember I thought Colleen wasn't going to say yes at the altar, so.
Naturally. I don't know if you guys know much about how it works, but basically we live in a townhouse together, and we'll live there until the wedding day.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of the wedding, you guys want to come?
When is it?
It's in a couple weeks.
Couple weeks.
Yeah.
Right, and that's another thing that you would think someone that was serious about this would make sure that immediately you would tell your parents so that they could prepare. And since it's late in the game and it's 2 weeks, it throws a lot of things into question. There's extended family, blah, 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 I don't know. So, I don't know. It just seems like she is not taking any of this really seriously, which is, I guess, not an immoral, although you could argue it's immoral to Paul. It's hard, if he is 100% in this, it's deceptive to him, right?
Before we bring kids into the equation, but we're happy that we are on the same page regarding having children. He's like, oh, we have to name our son Paul if we have a son. I was like, I'll consider a middle name. That's as far as this is going.
Yeah, I know it sounds crazy. It was really fast, right? You can't deny it, but.
Well, and then when you hear Micah talk about kids, and they've already talked about it, is that an indication that she is actually in this relationship? I don't know. I guess that's the mystery and the glory of the show. You just have no idea what they're going to do until they're at the altar.
As we know our daughter.
Things usually work out with Micah.
My biggest worry is that Micah's going to get her heart broken.
Never really thought about that, but yeah, that obviously is.
It means a lot to me that that you guys approve. It really does.
Do you approve?
Yeah, I guess there's a chance that Paul could say no and she could say yes, and he could break her heart. He isn't very expressive. She wasn't either in the pods, so I thought maybe they fit well together, but she, out of the pods, is more expressive, at least with laughter and more talkative. He is pretty blank, honestly, at least on camera, which is fine. Some people are just quieter, reserved, shy, in their head, introverted, who knows. So it's hard to know how he feels. It's hard to know how much he's in the relationship because he just doesn't indicate much either way, All right, well, I want to thank you for liking and subscribing, liking to this video, thumbs up, commenting below, and subscribing to the YouTube channel. It does help when you do that. It does help with the algorithm, and it helps with advertisers because when they see that, they're like, oh, well, we'll have him be a sponsor, or they'll be a sponsor for us. Anyway, so yeah, thanks for doing that. And of course, you don't have to. I don't usually when I watch YouTube. I don't know, I feel like maybe I should do it more often. To feel like when you see something you like, you should like it, because someone spent a lot of time on it. And I'm not saying you should be doing it for me. Whatever you watch on YouTube, a big deal is actually giving feedback. It is, especially if they're smaller content providers, I think it's a big deal to get those likes, particularly the really small ones. If you watch a really small YouTube channel and you comment and you like, it will be noticed. I was there for many, many years, like 8 or 9 years. I was a very small YouTuber, and when I got a comment or a like, I was like, oh, it's a big deal. Anyway, take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.